So fusion is the sort of stuff you get in the sun. The sun's a big old fusion reactor in it.
Yes, it is. Let's explain what fusion is.
No. Yeah, I've got it then, yeah.
Okay.
What's fusion?
So fusion is the process that, as you said, that happens in stars, as you kind of said. Basically, elements fusing together to make heavier elements. That's the sort of how all of the elements in the universe were formed after, hydrogen and helium.
Exactly. Yeah. Which sort of, the fact that releases a lot of energy is not
it's counterintuitive.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive.
Because surely, how does shoving things together make energy come out? Yeah.
In a kind of normally when you think of atoms and nuclear energy, breaking them apart and like release as if it's like an egg, and inside is delicious energy. Yeah. When you release it out,
that makes much more sense.
But it doesn't. That's not actually what happens.
Well, it is. I mean, with fission, you get a lot of energy coming out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sure.
But for some reason, not for some reason, but with fusion, what's going on in the sun, you have 4 or 5 times the amount of energy released from fusing nuclei than from fishing them. Performing fission on them.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. So anyway,
you lose a load of mass, don't you? The two things that go in, the product that comes out has quite a lot less mass than the two things that came in, and that mass is converted to energy, basically.
Exactly. If we convert energy with E equals mc squared, so you get a lot of energy out of a little amount of mass.
Yeah.
And that's the concept behind it. Yeah. And we obviously know that it's sound. It's not just someone's theory. It's happening in the sun.
Yes, yeah.
It's happening all over the universe. Mm-hmm. So it's just a case of trying to put that in a box, so that we can use some of it. Yeah. Some of that delicious fusion.
Yeah. And in a way, I mean, it is kind of the ultimate energy source.
Yes.
Maybe I don't know if there's any. I think it's like antimatter produce more energy, and they react. The energy produced from an antimatter annihilation is the mass that's converted to energy is much higher than in a fusion reaction.
But it's potentially more dangerous.
It's potentially more dangerous and much harder to produce, etc., etc. Fusion seems like it could be a really legitimate way to power, and a very sustainable way to power the future, or pretty much indefinitely.
Yeah, with very little sort of environmental cost or safety concern or just cost generally. Yeah. Once you get these things running, they're self-sustaining over long periods of time with very little fuel to produce a lot of energy.
Yeah.
So,
and we'll talk about the different designs for some of them.
Yeah.
Because the cost thing is something that's worth discussing further.
Sure.
Because some designs are mad expensive.
Especially in the moment,
and it's going to be a huge effort, potentially a huge effort. I mean, again, we'll talk about this more for humanity to get one of these things, to get a concept working that we can use everywhere. And people are pouring billions into these things.
Yeah.
So the basic concept then is to have fusion reactions happening. So the melding of nuclei inside a box, as you said, contained generally by a magnetic field.
Yeah, and then use the energy that releases essentially to do what we already do in power stations, which is drive a turbine of some kind and produce electricity. Yeah, which seems like a bit of an old-fashioned link in the chain, really, when you think about it. Because basically, what they're proposing doing is using the heat from fusion reactions to boil water. Yeah, and make steam drive a turbine.
Yeah, it's like a super advanced sun in a box. Yeah, and then you've just got a boiling water, like turning an old steam turbine.
Yeah, put the pans of boiling water in.
Yeah, but there are designs that would be able to potentially convert straight from the heat, not even from heat energy, straight from the movement of neutrons and things, and inside the fusion reactor straight to electricity, not actually through.
Which is the next step in the kind of second generation of these things, or generations down the line. Yeah. We'll probably, if this is a viable technology, we'll probably look at developing that kind of thing. Because at the moment, all of the designs, which we'll talk about in a minute, all use a particular fuel, which is 2 isotopes of hydrogen. So two different types of hydrogen that have different numbers of neutrons. Mm-hmm. And that's because those two things are the easiest to shove together and get to start fusing, if you know what I mean. But the things like helium, which are slightly heavier, they're harder to shove together, but once you get the fusion reactions going, they chuck out protons, which are electrically charged, and it means you can actually use that to directly induce a charge in
Because normally the neutrons that are spraying out are not.
Yeah, normally the neutrons spray out of the hydrogen isotope fusion. So
deuterium, tritium,
and deuterium. Yeah. So you have to somehow absorb the energy of those neutrons to then generate heat. And then you boil your steam and all that crap. Whereas with the helium, you actually get protons coming out, which means you can use the electrical current from the protons. To induce an electric current, for the charge of the protons to induce an electric current directly. Yes. So you get a much higher yield from your fusion.
Exactly.
So that's the dream. But currently the dream is hydrogen and deuterium and tritium.
Yes, yeah. And they're different. You have to have different temperatures to meld together different types of isotopes and different different nuclei, don't you?
That's right.
The fusion temperature they maximize for the two you were just talking about, deuterium, tritium, at something like 8 million Kelvin or 800 million.
800 million Kelvin.
Which is
Kelvin is just
high.
That's so basically take off 273 and you have degrees centigrade.
Yeah, so it's mad high.
Wait, no, add on 273, right? Oh, I can't remember, but it's basically when you get up to 800 million, adding on or taking away 273 is basically the same number anyway. Yeah. So whatever. Yeah. 800 million degrees C. Basically,
which is
fucking hot.
And you've got to contain that in a box. So mad hot. But as you go up to some of these different nuclei fusions, you end up having to go up to sort of billions, 8 billion Kelvin, which is again getting harder and harder to contain that type of energy.
Yeah.
And the most difficult thing with fusion reactors is not unlike fission reactors, which are you're sort of trying to contain it, stop it getting out of control, because it's just like trying to go mad and breed itself faster and faster and faster. The problem with fusion reactors is actually keeping them going. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why they're so safe, is because you don't have all the radioactive fallout for a start. I mean, obviously you don't want to be in a fusion reactor while it's on or near it. But if say someone dropped a bomb on a fusion reactor, it would just turn off.
Yeah.
Because everything, the plasma, the fusion reactor's going on, the heat would dissipate and they'd all just grind to a halt almost immediately.
Yeah. The whole thing relies on keeping all that energy contained so that the fusion can go on. If that plasma or whatever it is that's undergoing fusion gets out, it's just going to the energy's going to dissipate rapidly, and you're just no longer going to have a fusion reaction. So in that sense, it's very safe. There's no worry about accidentally creating a star or something.
I wonder if there'll be.
I'm pretty sure I've seen seen things like that written about it.
I was going to say, I wonder if there'll be, if we eventually get one of these things working, if there'll be Large Hadron Collider type black hole going to eat the world type stories.
Probably. I'm almost certain there will be. In fact, they probably already exist.
That'd be good.
Yeah, they're always good fun. Helium is the main byproduct of the current sort of generation of technologies.
So you can just fill balloons, or just
walk around with a
voices.
squeaky voice.
So it's not that much of a problem. Basically, I mean, to be honest, it's kind of the perfect.
It is
fuel source, energy source.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not really much, apart from the fact that it's very high tech and probably very difficult to build, and possibly there's some questions about keeping them maintained, this sort of stuff. If you can get it working and solve those engineering problems, there's not really a chink in its armor.
No, it's pretty spectacular. And in terms of numbers as well, it's something like 1 kilo of fusion fuel, so in this case hydrogen, isotopes of hydrogen, would have the same energy density when it undergoes fusion as 100 million kilos of fossil fuels. So you just think about how little fuel you need to run one of these reactors and produce enough energy to power whole cities and stuff, in comparison to just the amount of stuff we have to hack out of the ground to do it currently.
Yeah, which does all sorts of things that we don't want.
Yeah. So it's almost like someone's just made up a magic solution to the problem to our problems.
Yeah, the problem was sort of sitting in the sky the whole time. Just sort of going, this is how you solve your energy crisis. Yeah. We can't find a way to do it yet, though.
Not yet, but there's some things on the horizon that are looking potentially promising.
There are. So most of the things that people that are developing this then are large governments, aren't they? I mean, they're sort of multinational efforts.
Yeah.
Involving, European countries, America,
often
all sorts of places.
Yeah, huge collaborations between governments, between lots of countries.
Yeah. So, what's the name of the big project that's doing the
down in France, the ITER, which is
ITER, yeah.
I can't remember what the acronym stands for. Something about thermonuclear energy, something or other. International Thermonuclear Energy Reactor.
ITER, energy reactor.
Could be something. It's definitely got the word thermonuclear in there.
Okay, cool.
Which is good because that's an awesome word. But that thing is gigantic for a start.
Yeah. So that's funded by. Is it a global funding body?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Pretty much. I mean, it's the US, Russia.
Everyone's got chips.
France, loads of European countries. Yeah. I don't know if China's involved or not, but possibly. In fact, they might not be. But anyway.
Probably got their own thing going on.
Sure. Yeah, who knows?
Yeah. And that's costing like 14 billion or something at the moment.
Or more. I mean, it's already at 14 billion.
Yeah.
And that's already over budget, and it's not going to be done until 2019, and then they're going to start testing it in 2020 something, and then they're not even going to start running proper plasma experiments, so the real kind of fusion stuff, until the late 2020s. So by that point, who knows what the cost of it's going to have run into?
Yes.
It's an extremely expensive
mega project.
Yeah. Another good word. This episode's full of good words.
Oh yeah.
So, how much was the Large Hadron Collider
a lot.
to build?
I think we looked this up, but I've forgotten.
Yeah.
Was it?
So that's obviously a similar scale project. This thing down in France is absolutely massive. By the way.
well, describe what type of.
So there's
reactor
this is probably worthwhile talking about the different types of fusion reactor.
13.25 billion
for the LHC.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's less.
That's
than
talking.
Oh, that's the cost. I remember looking this up now.
And that's all the costs.
That's the cost of finding the Higgs boson.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So that includes the cost of building the thing and running it up until the discovery was made.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this thing down in France is a lot more expensive.
It's about $1 billion a year operating budget.
Cool billion.
Cool bill.
Yeah. So anyway, so there's several different types of there's sort of two. On a fundamental level, there's two different ways people try to do fusion. Sure. One of them is called inertial confinement fusion, and the other one is magnetic confinement. I think that's what they're called. Basically, one of them is literally just a fuel pellet that you fire lasers at from all directions.
Yeah.
Really, really high-powered lasers.
Yeah.
And you try and get the fuel pellet to collapse in on itself under extreme heat and start a fusion reaction in the center,
sort
which
of
then
implode.
Implodes. Starts a fusion reaction in the center, undergoes a chain reaction, and then the whole fuel pellet starts to undergo fusion.
Yeah.
That's what that is.
Yes.
And that moment of chain reaction is called ignition, and they have places like the National Ignition Facility in the US where they built tons and tons of like megawatt lasers for firing at these fuel pellets. But I mean, they've done cool stuff with these things. They've managed to get more energy out of these reactions than they put in.
Yeah.
But they have not reached ignition, which is this chain reaction, which is self-sustained fusion.
Yeah.
I think one of the main problems with it is that it's really hard to get symmetrical. You have to have the fuel pellet collapse in an exactly symmetrical way.
Oh, right.
Otherwise, you get blowout on one side or another. But you need all the pressure going inwards to the core
exerted exactly
the same, and that's one of the many hurdles to it.
Yeah.
That's the inertial confinement. So that's one angle. The other one, which seems to be a bit more promising, and it's what this giant place down in France is using, is magnetic confinement. So that's basically you have a plasma, just like a really hot ionized form of matter.
They heat that up with microwaves or something.
Is that it?
I think the one of the Lockheed one I think was using microwaves to start with.
I actually don't know how they heat the plasma. How they get make the plasma.
They get plasma.
Just buy some plasma in like a bottle or something.
Yeah, go down to a co-op or whatever.
So the plasma. So magnetic confinement. You have a super hot plasma, and because you need it at 800 million degrees or whatever, that you can't contain it with just with materials, and the material
No.
can survive that. So you use magnetic fields to contain the plasma. So it's magnetic confinement.
Yeah.
And this big old thing down in France is a form of magnetic confinement reactor called a tokamak, which is another cool word.
Yeah, it's a nice word.
It's a Russian
Tokamak.
acronym.
Oh, it's an acronym?
Yeah.
Tokamaks.
Stands for Russian stuff.
Yes. I imagined it wouldn't. That's a Russian language acronym? Surely it's using Cyrillic.
Yeah, it is. If you look it up on Wikipedia, it gives you in brackets the Cyrillic, but it's pronounced the same.
Cool.
And it looks very similar because those letters are very similar.
Yeah. So that basically confines it, with magnetic confinement, which it's different from a stellarator, right? A stellarator also uses magnetic confinement.
Yeah.
But a stellarator, they basically differ slightly in the way that they actually the way they arrange the magnets in order to keep the plasma stable.
Yeah.
That's kind of the only real difference.
That is, yeah. So I think Stellarators are the kind of original, slightly older design.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Which was basically the problem is once you have plasma and things are flying around with ridiculous energy.
Yeah.
The problem is keeping them all together where they're close enough to undergo fusion, because their tendency is for them to all just fly off in crazy directions. Sure. So to do that, they come up with various geometries of the plasma so that its tendency to fly off is then harnessed in a way that feeds it back into the middle of the reaction and stuff like that. It's all a bit kind of complicated. But the Tokamaks, they're like a torus, like a ring of plasma.
Mm-hmm.
And
a donut.
That's generated by basically feeding like a helical magnetic field all the way around it, running that magnetic current basically through the plasma itself. Whereas the Stellarators, which is the other kind, are just a series of like rings of magnets around the outside of the thing, which just by applying an external magnetic field and twisting it in a certain way, physically twisting the actual tube of it twists.
Yeah, the magnet, literally the geometry of the magnets is twisted round and round in kind of a.
That's what creates this sort of helical path for all the particles that keeps them from flying off.
Yeah.
So it's just two slightly different ways of doing it, and the Stellarators look insane. Yeah,
they do. The Stellarator they've got built. I will talk about the different ones a bit more in more detail.
Yeah.
I think that the Tokamak one is bigger, isn't it?
Larger.
Well, I mean, then they're not as a rule larger. It just happens to be that the major Tokamak project at the moment is bigger than the Stellarator one in Germany.
Yeah, the ITER one in France is freaking massive.
Yeah, it's beast.
You can find like images, like just renders of a cross section of it, of the the tube that the plasma is going to be going through next to a person.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's big enough to drive a bus through. It's fucking huge.
Yeah, it's a big boy.
Big donut of plasma.
But the Stellarators, I mean, you could get a guy through the cavity in the middle.
Yeah.
You could walk through the cavity. Could you walk through the cavity? But anyway, it's big enough to get a person through, but it's not as large. You can drive a bus through or anything.
No.
It's still a big piece of equipment. But it's not
Yeah, and it looks mental. Like the Stellarators, because they have that weird sort of twisting coils of magnets and stuff.
Yeah.
It looks like a cross between like a roller coaster and intestines. If you had some kind of like mechanized intestine system that also was a roller coaster, that's what it looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's
really.
I mean, it kind of does look like that. A Stellarator. I mean, a Stellarator. Oh man, it's just full of awesome work. A Stellarator. It's a sun radiated like this. A star.
It's a machine for doing the sun's business. doing the stuff.
What an analogy.
Like you said, like a radiator, but it's a Stellarator.
Yeah, it's a great name. So those are the two big projects at the moment. The two kind of mainstream.
Yeah, so the one in Germany that I think did you mention the name of it? The Wendelstein.
I didn't mention the name. No.
Wendelstein 7X or something like that. That's very much experimental. Obviously, so is the one in France, but I think the Stellarator in Germany is intended purely to demonstrate the possibility of using a Stellarator.
Yeah.
For sustained reactions. Rather, I think the France one, they're not going to turn it into a power station, but it's meant to be a step beyond that, I think. basically evaluating a design for an eventual power station.
Yeah, so it's only to put like 5 times the amount of, or get out 5 times the amount of energy it put in, right? They put in for this ITER one.
Yeah, the ITER one. I think they're going to it's one of its aims is to momentarily, whatever that means, probably milliseconds or less.
Yes.
Produce 10 times the amount of energy that's gone in, but then actually have a sustained reaction that's producing 5 times. I mean, that's it, right? That's a legitimate fusion power station, basically.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, they're not running it in the sense that it's not supposed to be it's not going to be kind of getting its money back.
No, they're not going to just plug it into the mains.
Yeah, no. It's all still just for hardware testing.
It is, yeah. I think that there's many things they need to, other things beyond just the fusion reaction itself that also need to be worked out in terms of building a successful economic power station.
Yes.
So I think that's what the ITER, the goal of the ITER reactor is to sort of evaluate all those kind of steps that you need to,
how you repair it, all this kind of things.
Exactly, yeah. And things to do with how to more efficiently capture the high energy neutrons and turn them into heat and all that kind of stuff. All these hurdles.
Yeah. But the what's it called? Wendelstein.
Yeah.
Stellarator is I think is just the aim is just to run it for 30 minutes. Basically show that you can run a Stellarator continually for 30 minutes. Which is like one of the cornerstones of a Stellarator, of a design using a Stellarator. So it's like you say, not as ambitious or as far along in terms of development in the same way. It's not reaching for the same thing as the ITER.
It's not quite, no, but it's operational now.
Yeah,
which is the difference. I mean, I think.
Well, they've
tested it or something.
They've started putting in
December.
Exactly. They've started running it, like you're literally running it.
Yeah.
Putting in, they did some plasma burns to remove any sort of debris or dirt basically on the inside of this thing. You just put like an 8 million degree plasma through it just to give it a clean.
Some engineers forgot to get out in time.
Yeah.
It's
been obliterated. Yeah. So there are other projects though, of course.
Of course. Yeah. It's just that ITER one is by far the biggest. Yeah. But there are other Tokamak style projects, like the Joint European Torus and a few other projects. And there's lots of ignition ones. The inertial confinement ones scattered around as well.
Yeah. Don't I think I read this incorrectly? But the inertial confinement method was starting to become, people starting to think that maybe it's just not a good method of going about trying to start fusion reactions or trying to go about getting a fusion power station.
I think so. I think that National Ignition Facility in the US is kind of quite old now, I think.
Yeah. And
they still haven't managed to achieve ignition. But I think it's just that the power you need from if it's all the power is coming from lasers, that it's a lot of power. Obviously, the threshold energy to get a fusion reaction started is the same regardless of whether you have plasma or a fuel pellet or whatever. But it's easier to obtain that with magnetically confined plasma than it is with lasers.
Yeah,
I think.
So it feels like that one might be getting left behind slightly.
Yeah, although I mean, basically it seems that people are talking about the magnetic confinement stuff more than the inertial stuff. But who knows? These inertial confinement systems are again massive. Just the banks of lasers they have to generate the power is crazy. Huge warehouses full of like tubes to magnify the lasers and bend them into the right place. Yeah, it's crazy stuff.
On the subject of size is really important to things like Tokamaks and Stellarators, right? In terms of magnetic confinement. I think it
seems to be,
the general, and that's why that Tokamak, the ITER Tokamak, is so massive, is the general thinking is that the larger you go with these things, the better you're able to keep that plasma stable and contain the plasma.
Yeah.
So the fact that, that Stellarators, a Stellarator designed power plant they're thinking probably be even bigger than this Stellarator they've got at the moment. I don't know if the Tokamak they're thinking might even be again bigger than the one they're going to design, or they're just going to be using, finessing the design of that roughly that size they think for a power plant. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. But
I'm not sure they know either.
But I think the thought is that bigger is better. Just the way it scales, the physics of it sort of seems to be that it's easier to confine, or it's just generally a bit more efficient if it's much bigger. Yes. Which is current thinking. But
yeah, that kind of makes sense, I suppose.
Yeah.
In the effect that you've got a larger, it's kind of like less space for it to get out. It's kind of a bigger, central core of plasma.
Yeah.
It's easier to sort of space area to volume ratio is slightly better.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And actually, again, this comes back to cost as well. That's one of the reasons why things like this ITER project are ridiculously expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, they're huge engineering projects, massive scale sort of constructions, as well as being, the actual engineering involved being a very, very high technical, advanced materials.
Which is why they crawl for development. They're so slow.
Yeah, really slow.